It's week 2 of Eagles camp. The pads are going on today. It's practice number 5 at the NovaCare complex. How about these fans packing the sidelines the past few days as the 2022 season inches just a little bit closer? Welcome to Inside Training Camp, presented by Independence Blue Cross. I'm your host, Ella DiGiovanni, and I'll soon be joined by your Eagles insider, Dave Spadaro and Fran Duffy. But before we get to all that, I have a little something for you, Eagles fans. Yesterday, our social media team set up a camera with a sign that read, "Which player on the team has the best hair?" Let's see what the players had to say.
Who has the best hair on the team?
It ain't him. Not me. It ain't him. Cool. I got a haircut.
Lane Johnson, without doubt.
Matter of fact, I changed my mind. TJ Edwards put a picture of his hair on here, you'll see it.
Who has the best hair on the team? What? You see that? No question.
Isaac is the GOAT with the best hair on the team. I told him to cut some off and let me have some.
Come on, that's an easy one.
This ain't naps now.
That would be cool.
You know what I'm saying? Then again, my boy Dallas going bald. Come here, Dallas. Show.
Well, as I welcome in Eagles insider Dave Spadaro. Dave, a little rude. None of the guys said you had the best hair. What's that all about?
Well, they're just going with the guys who force the look. You know, for my money, Ella, I'm going with James Bradbury, Lane Johnson. But for those who are not blessed with the natural look, I'm going to go with, Andre Sachare is a sneaky guy, and I think Avonte Maddox has a really great head of hair. But look, Isaac Seumalo is in a class of his own.
Love it. I love that our social team did that. Got some nice reaction. We saw some of the personalities of those guys. Well, Dave, we're going to talk some football now. What have you seen so far when it comes to the depth of this Eagles roster?
Yeah, really great depth on the offensive and defensive lines, Ella, and I think that's really what you want to build from. The philosophy dating back to the late days of Ray Rhodes, the early days of Andy Reid, certainly Howie Roseman has carried on the tradition of building from the inside out. And when you look at all the resources the Eagles have spent along the defensive line, along the offensive line, I think you point to that. They're not the glamour guys, Ella, but certainly the offensive and defensive lines are so impressive, such top line talent. The return of Brandon Graham really fortifies that D-line. Bringing in somebody like Jordan Davis, who's gained rave reviews early in camp, makes that D-line special, and Hassan Reddick I consider kind of part of that D-line. Offensive line, look, I mean, the emergence of Jordan Mailata across the board, the way the Eagles have invested in draft, it is outstanding at the line of scrimmage, and that's why the Eagles have a chance to be really, really good this year.
When you think about the practice schedule, how it's been structured through the first 2 weeks of camp, what do you think about it? How do the players feel about it?
Well, we're in a new era in the NFL, and it was interesting to me as I wrote yesterday on the app on PhiladelphiaEagles.com that Dick Vermeil there, he came in today, yesterday, and he's the guy who had these brutal 3-hour practices, right? These days, the Eagles now just putting on pads for the first time. It is a different way of doing things. 17-game schedule, longer season. It is a way of getting the mental reps in first, so that when the Eagles get into the more physical part of camp, the joint practices against Cleveland and against Miami, and the 3 preseason games, they'll have plenty of time to evaluate and minimize this roster from 90 players to 53. It is about, let's keep this in mind, everybody, training camp is about finding the best 53 and then identifying great candidates for the practice squad. It's not about winning games. It's not about that. And so the Eagles should have, certainly, as we saw last year, plenty of time to do that.
Well, Eagles rookie Jordan Davis was asked about these walkthroughs, and he explained how effective they can really be. Let's take a look.
Walkthroughs is mental reps. It's just as important as the on-field reps because it's at a slower pace. Not a slower pace because your walkthrough is kind of like a jog-through, run-through. But, you're learning at it's not a lot of, fuzz around it. It's just you, the scheme, and you're learning. So the walkthroughs are very important because some days you might not get a lot of reps on the field, but the walkthrough reps you have to take into account. And then you take the stuff that you learn from the classroom into the walkthrough and then the walkthrough onto the field, and it all goes hand in hand. So if you're not intense in walkthrough, that's not to say like, you can't be, it's just you have to stay mentally focused. And I'm just trying to learn everything. I think that I'm at the point in time where I want to learn everything. I want to be able to contribute. So, of course, every rep is going to be important. Of course, all eyes are going to be on me. So.
The Eagles will have another walkthrough tomorrow before hitting the practice field again the day after. Well, I'm welcoming in Fran Duffy now. Fran, Dave and I spoke about the depth on the offense and defensive lines. The offensive line, defensive line went one-on-one for the first time yesterday. What'd you think?
Well, obviously, number 90, Jordan Davis, he had some flashes. But for me, Ella, the most impressive rep goes to the guy who's protecting Jalen Hurts' blind side, and that's number 68, Jordan Mailata. I was so impressed with his first rep against defensive end Josh Sweat, who tried to throw a nice little bull rush and then slap and try and get the corner on him. But really what stood out to me was the way that Jordan Mailata recovered. And that's something we did not see from him early in his career. As he continues to develop, it is just so impressive to see how far he has come in such a short little time. You got to give a lot of credit to Jordan, give a lot of credit to the coaching staff, everybody involved. He's going to be one of the best left tackles in football before it's all said and done.
Well, there's a lot of eyes on that wide receiver room this year. Frank, can you tell us a little bit about what you've been seeing in the way Devontae Smith and A.J. Brown have been complimenting each other through camp?
Yeah, and I think that everybody knows that these guys are very different body types, right? I mean, A.J. Brown is over 205, 210 pounds, and there's a reason why Devontae Smith's nickname is the Slim Reaper. He's got a different kind of build, but I think when you look at the usage of these two guys, it's very, very similar. Both guys can line up inside and outside. Both guys can take a short pass or a screen and take it to the house. Both guys can separate at the intermediate level, and both guys can track the deep ball. So you have two players that can line up inside and outside and be three-level threats at the wide receiver position. Not only is that hard to find, but these guys do it in such different ways. It gives the coaching staff so much flexibility going into a weekly game plan. It is going to be huge for them this season, and we're already seeing it pay dividends out here on the practice field.
All right, friend, let's get the band back together here, bringing Dave Spadaro back into the mix. Dave, where are you on the practice field? What are you seeing?
Well, I'm looking at Harold Carmichael hugging everybody right now, to be honest with you, on the sidelines as the Eagles go through their warm-ups. And it's a really great crowd, excellent energy. It's really fun for me, Ella, to walk around and just meet with some of the fans and see some familiar faces. They're glad to be back at practice, obviously, and very complimentary of how the Eagles are running things here and just getting into that Eagles vibe. I think we all understand how excited everyone is for this 2022 season. And, it's been fun. And I'm loving, I got to tell you, a little chill looking out here and seeing the Eagles in full pads for the first time this season. I love it, and it just signifies the next ramp up in this training camp period.
It is kind of surreal to see when the pads finally go on. We know football is right around the corner. Fran, knowing the pads are on today, there's a walkthrough tomorrow. Dave and I just spoke about the structure of this practice schedule. How hard do you think you'll see them go today?
We'll see. I mean, could it be a shorter practice because they know you're going to go have those high-intensity periods? I guess we'll continue to watch and see. My guys, look, it's beautiful. It's hot outside right now. This is a perfect day for the first day of pads. So I'm interested to see how long they go. My guess is this will be the most intense practice of camp to date. I know they've got a couple of these drills out ready for individual periods. Some of these guys are going to be happy they've got the pads on today because there's going to be some high-intensity reps here in individual period.
When we talk about the offensive line, and I touched on it with both of you so far, we think about the run game. As we know, the Eagles excelled on the ground last season. There was some talk around Miles Sanders this past week because he was seen taking some reps with the second-team offense on Friday. Nick Sirianni came out on Saturday and said, Miles Sanders is our guy. He's played pretty well through camp. Dave, what are your thoughts on what you've seen from both Miles Sanders and the pack that follows him?
Yeah, I really like the shape that he's come in. I mean, this is a big year for Miles, obviously. Final year of his contract. I know that he is not happy that he didn't get into the end zone last year. So I think, look, Miles is the guy. And the only thing that separated Miles from really, really big numbers and great production is a couple of injuries in his career. So no real concerns there. I don't buy into any of the second team stuff. It's really, right. I think at this point, everybody's watching practice and kind of trying to invent something because these practices have largely been without a lot of news. So Miles, I like Miles. I like the depth at running back. I wonder if the Eagles will make a move for a bigger back at some point. There's really not that masher, that short yardage goal line person. But for the most part, I think Kenny Gainwell has taken big steps, and we know Boston Scott can be a really valuable player. So I am very excited to see this running back group that helped lead the NFL on the ground last year. I see no reason why it should not be a dynamic running back attack, once again led by Miles Sanders.
Sirianni did go on to say it is a by committee approach. Like you said, it's a 17-game season. When you're playing running back, there could be a lot of tread on the tires. You need to have a committee that you know you can draw from when your offense operates on the ground. Fran, what do you hope to see from this running game? Is it something that's going to be built upon from last year? I know Kenny Gainwell. I know you love watching him play.
No doubt. I mean, Kenny Gainwell, he brings such a dual threat option to that position room with his ability as both a runner and a pass catcher. And I think when you look at these backs across the board, there's that game-breaking ability, but then also that ability to impact the pass game. And that is going to be so focal to this offense, so important to that game plan on a weekly basis. And I think when you look at Jalen Hurts and his impact in the run game, not just when he's a ball carrier, but the threat of him as a ball carrier, obviously that's huge for this offense and a big reason why they had so much success last year.
Let's go to the defensive side of the ball a little bit. Dave, I want to ask you about Marcus Epps. He's turned a lot of heads through this first week and a half of practice. An excellent article was written on PhiladelphiaEagles.com about him, and I know you caught up with him during OTAs. Last year, 56 tackles in 2021, and then the defensive passing game coordinator, Denard Wilson, this week, he spoke so highly of Epps last season and was crediting his performance last year as to why he's going to perform so well this year. What have you seen out of him so far?
Here's an example of a player who is making the most of a second chance. Drafted by the Minnesota Vikings, released by them, picked up by the Eagles, and has slowly increased his reps. Worked hard, learned two defenses. Somebody who's just a tough, in the right place kind of player. And I think the Eagles are really high on Marcus Epps, who I know TJ Edwards is probably in this category as well, but maybe the most underrated player on this roster. And the fact that the Eagles went out and were able to get Jaquiski Tartt gives them three experienced safeties. I think Marcus Epps, at this point, is kind of the guy you look to and say, he's our playmaker at the safety positions. Really like him. Looking forward to seeing what Tartt brings, and thrilled that the Eagles added a third player there, because I think you're going to need, as we saw last year, Eagles employing three safeties, rotating them. But Marcus Epps, don't sleep on Marcus Epps. He's a very good football player, even if a lot of people outside the NovaCare complex don't talk about it.
And Fran, how do you see that taking shape without Rodney McLeod this year as he went to the Colts in the offseason, and all these pieces kind of coming together? What do you think we'll see from this position?
Well, I think this is a position group that is obviously so important for this defense overall. And when you play a lot of zone coverage, you need that strength up the middle. And so you look at the third level, that's the safety position. Those guys are going to be a lot of the times the signal callers on the back end, getting everybody else lined up, and also the last line of defense. So when you look at Marcus Epps, when you look at Anthony Harris, and you look at Kayvon Wallace, and you look at Jaquiski Tartt, I think it's obviously a very, very important position group for this Eagles defense. They got solid play from everybody last year, and now everybody now in that second year on defense, just trying to get into, try and be ahead of the game of where they were at this time a year ago. To this point, it seems that's certainly the case.
Howie Roseman earlier in the week said, nobody works harder than Marcus. Pretty high praise coming from your general manager. Well, we were just looking over at the offensive line again. Some funny interactions during camp between Landon Dickerson and Jordan Mailata. Let's take a look.
I don't really like him. I got to sit beside him. I got to play beside him. I don't really talk to him. I love Jordan. He's a good friend of mine. It's been, oh, geez. All right. Just interview. Skin. I was just talking about how much I hate you. No, like, great dude. Building a lot of chemistry this offseason. Now in practice, too. And it's, same thing in the whole line room. We just, we all have a camaraderie with each other. And that's a huge thing, because it takes, all five of us on the offensive line and every guy in that room to be a good unit.
Chemistry, 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 Dave. I feel like we're hearing that word a lot. What does this mean, especially for a position group like the offensive line, to be building this way, seeing their personalities and their relationships really grow?
Yeah, isn't that one of Nick Sirianni's mantras here? It's about connecting. And certainly for the offensive line, where communication is so important, trust is so important, timing, coordination means everything. And I'm standing out here watching Jeff Stoutland and listening to him and seeing the energy that he brings and how the players respond to him, and he and Roy Istvan, the offensive line assistant coach. I mean, these players really know that Stout and Roy, the way that they coach and the energy that they put into the players, that brings out the best in them. And so look, camaraderie, chemistry, it's not, and Fran, you tell me, I mean, look, it's not talent, because we all see players get drafted primarily on talent, first and foremost, but without the chemistry, without the camaraderie, you're just not going to have a great offensive line.
Well, Jordan Mailata had a response to the things that Landon Dickerson was saying. Let's hear what Jordan had to say.
Yeah, I absolutely hate Landon. Hate him. Terrible person. Never spent a day with him, so yeah, hate the bloke. Nah, just that's my brother, man. You know, we built this off-season a tremendous relationship off-field, and just working out together, even just hanging around, golfing together, grabbing lunch. You know, just trying to build that connection off-field so we can translate it onto the field and, you know, grow that relationship on the field even more. So it's been great. Landon's been like a big bro and a little bro at the same time.
Fran, we're looking at Coach Stout right now. Yesterday, rookie center Cam Jurgens said that Coach Stout is intense, but he said you're going to get the same coach every single day. What are you seeing from Coach Stout through camp? Because camp is an opportunity to really see him go to work, see what he does with his players throughout practice, how he communicates with them. What are you seeing from him?
Well, I think the thing you see with Coach Stoutland is he's the same person every day, and that's that same intensity, that same level of passion. You see him walking through the hallway in the NovaCare complex. You see him out on the sideline on game day. You see him out in the practice field. It's the same thing every day, just showing that intensity and that passion that bleeds through with his players. This is a guy that obviously wants to see not just the starters, not just the top backups, but the last guy on the depth chart. He wants to see all of these guys succeed, and that's something that you get to see. And that's one of the reasons why, honestly, and I feel like we see the development that we've seen time and time again with this group.
Yeah, there's no doubt, Fran, you're right. And it is the same level. And Stout, he just loves it. I mean, we see him walk through the halls at NovaCare, and he's just the same guy. He's just so into it. And I think I remember back to the days of Juan Castillo, and the Eagles have had some really great offensive line coaches. You know, the position coach is so vital to the development of players. And we've seen Stout repeatedly take players who aren't as heralded and turn them into fantastic players. And he and Roy Istvan have done a terrific job. And I mean, I'm looking at the prime example of that, and that's number 68. We've talked about him here, Jordan Mailata, who is an example of taking a talented piece of clay and molding him into something extremely special, polishing him up into a diamond. And that's what Stout does, because he loves it. He loves his players. They appreciate it, and you hear it time and time again as they are receiving new contracts and accolades and recognition from the league. They all thank Coach Stout.
Well, now we're going to take a look at the DBs here. Dave, when you think about the moves the Eagles made in the offseason to really beef up this secondary, what's that saying? If you build it, they will come? It was kind of sort of unfolded like that, huh?
Yeah, and we saw it last year when the Eagles signed very late prior to training camp, or actually as training camp started. Steven Nelson added just a solid veteran at the cornerback position. With James Bradbury, you take it another step further and you go, hey, we added a Pro Bowl player who's going to team with Darius Slay, and the Eagles can match up with any receivers at all that they're going to face this year. So really exciting move there. Jaquaske Tart is somebody who's an experienced player, been in big games, 64 starts in 7 seasons in San Francisco. Interviewed him the other day. He was in the Eagles Insider podcast. He's the guy, if you want to wonder about how athletic he is, he's the guy who chased down Quez Watkins in that San Francisco game. It turned into a 93-yard gain. Eagles eventually failed in the short yardage situation at the goal line. But you see the athletic ability with Jaquaske Tart. So physical player, adding 2 veterans like that, really, really huge. And kind of put the finishing touches on this defense, which has just had a great overhaul in the offseason.
Well, when you talk about a veteran presence, Anthony Harris, he is a pure prime vet. Anthony Harris had a pretty good offseason. I think we have a photo here. He got engaged. Good for Anthony Harris. Hopefully good offseason leads to a really good season for Anthony Harris. Mailata, we have him coming up. Let's see what he was up to in this offseason. Apparently he was on The Masked Singer. I don't know if you heard. The guy has some pipes. A lot of talent from Jordan Mailata on the left side. Fran, I'm going to go back to you real quick. We were talking about that veteran presence in the secondary. How in practice, when you're looking at practice, I know you're out there every single day, how can that secondary really, really help this group of receivers get better?
Well, that's the thing is, and players love to say it, right? Coaches love it, the iron sharpens iron. So the better you are on one side of the ball, that's going to help improve the guys on the opposite side, right? And so when you've got the veteran presences that the Eagles have in the secondary, you pair that with the talent they've got at the wide receiver position, all of these guys are going to make each other better on a daily basis. And it's something we've seen not just in individual one-on-one drills, but also in team sessions, just really, really spirited reps on both sides of the football. We're seeing that not just in the secondary with the receivers, but also in the trenches with the offensive line and defensive line. So you hear Jason Kelsey talk about Jordan Davis. You hear Fletcher Cox talk about Cam Jurgens. It's just great to be able to see those guys feed into each other on a daily basis.
Fran, when a secondary like this has a defensive line up front as strong and as good as they are, how does that help them in terms of communication or kind of disguising what they're doing on the defensive side of the ball?
Yeah, I think a big thing is that, Jonathan Gannon likes to talk about changing the picture for the quarterback. And so you want to show them one thing before the snap and something different afterwards. And those changes can be very, very subtle. It could be just the alignment of guys in the front seven. It could be where a safety is located pre-snap versus post-snap. And when you have guys that are comfortable in the scheme on both sides, well, that's where you can start to get a little bit more creative and a little bit more flexible in terms of being able to use these guys. And so I think when you look at everybody in year two of this defense, I think that you're going to really expect to see them take that next step on a communication standpoint and also from an execution level as well.
Dave, yesterday Jordan Davis was getting a lot of questions about his size. The staff was very happy with the way that he came into camp. They said he was very prepared, and he said specifically, they're trying to keep me in the 330, 340-pound range. What does this say about a young guy, a young rookie like him, who is so focused on every part of his game, even when it comes down to, his body fat and his weight, to be ready to go and play some football in the NFL?
Yeah, I think he's somebody who really wants to be a contributor and eventually a star in this league, and understands again that the coaches are doing and the organization wants him to be at his best. So that's an optimal weight. Look, he's a big, huge guy. There've been very few that I've seen through my 26 seasons here with the Eagles that I've been kind of going to step back and go, wow, this is a massive man. He's one of them, as is Jordan Mailata. But the thing with, with that body type, you can put on a lot of weight very quickly. So it's important that he doesn't fluctuate, that he stays consistent, that he develops good habits. And for a lot of these young players, when they come into the NovaCare complex, what's interesting is for those who've never been through here, full kitchen here at NovaCare, great chefs, fantastic healthy food menu. They want players to eat here. They want players to eat healthily. They don't want them going and eating fast food. So I think that's what's really important here. Jordan wants to be great. Eagles want him to be great. And to do so, he needs to be at a very, very peak physical condition. And that starts with his weight.
Just this morning when I was grabbing breakfast, there was a nutritionist working with the player, kind of guiding him through what the breakfast options were, what protein to put in his oatmeal. And I thought that was super interesting because people don't realize all that goes into the making of a football player, right? I mean, it stretches far beyond practice. I know we're looking at practice right now, but all of these other elements are what make them so great. And when you think about guys like Brandon Graham coming back from an injury, he said last week the hardest part of recovery is you're laying down for a while, your body is idle, you gain some weight. But Brandon Graham doesn't look like he's missed a step since returning from that Achilles injury.
No, and that's what was great. I mean, we talked about this on the Eagle Eye in the Sky podcast after day one, that just seeing Brandon Graham coming off the torn Achilles, day one, session one, very first rep, he's out there with the first team unit, and it was like he never missed a day, right? So just seeing BG out there, seeing number 55 was huge for this Eagles team. And look, it's going to be really interesting to see what his role is, because when you bring in a guy like Hassan Reddick, he's going to see a lot of pass rush reps off the edge. And so I feel like that means that we'll see a little bit more BG rushing from the inside over guards. We saw him do a little bit of both in the one-on-one session on Monday. So that'll be one of the interesting storylines I'm going to be watching, not just through camp, but also through the early stages of the season as well.
We're going to take a look at James Bradbury. We talk about the additions to this Eagles defense in the offseason. Dave, I know we touched on James Bradbury on Saturday at Inside Training Camp, but we can't stop. He's doing really well in camp. You line him up with Darius Slay. It's a lethal combination. How excited are you to see them continue to build throughout training camp?
I honestly cannot wait to see them on the field. And I know we've got to go keep our focus day to day here, right? And we got to go get a little bit better every day, as we are all trying to do, including us. But James Bradbury and Darius Slay together, and then Avonte Maddox inside. I mean, that's as good a group as you're going to find. And what Bradbury brings is a studious, hardworking, physical, big cornerback who will team perfectly with Darius Slay. And I know that we've been watching a lot of practice, and Fran and Chris Mack are taking all the notes and watching the matchups against an outstanding group of wide receivers. And the Eagles cornerbacks are going toe-to-toe with them. Bradbury, perfect fit, great get. And he fits the scheme very nicely, the mentality, the hard work. I think that Bradbury, again, as we talked about just a little bit ago, he and Tart take this secondary to a new level. And the way the Eagles have rebuilt the front seven, the way they've added to the secondary, can't wait to see what Jonathan Gannon's defense does in year number 2.
You mentioned Jaquiski Tart. It's interesting. Yesterday or on Saturday, he said in a press conference that once he saw James Bradbury going to Philly, he knew that's where he wanted to go too. So this defense is kind of building itself, if you will, based on talent. These players want to play together. They chose to be here in Philadelphia, which I think is exciting. But you also mentioned Avonte Maddox. Well, he had some sentiments to share about James Bradbury. Let's see what he had to say.
He brings a lot. I mean, he's first off, just a tremendous person. I mean, he actually funny, like quiet funny though. He don't really talk much, but when he talk, I'm laughing. But other than that, he's just a smart football player, very athletic. He's been in the league for years, and you could tell he's smart because he knows where all his help at. And when he always talking like in this defense, he's talking to our safeties like, I'll be here, you hit me here, or if I'm here, I got you here. So, I don't really have to talk to him as much because he already kind of understands it in the most part. So that's a good thing when you have people out there that understands the defense already.
Well, the Eagles are just 10 days away from that first preseason game against the New York Jets here at home at Lincoln Financial Field. Fran, how will the next week or so start to shake out? Dave and I spoke about these walkthroughs and these design practices to get these players ready for that first preseason game. What do you expect to see?
Well, you'll start to see this team get into a little bit of a rhythm with a practice schedule. Obviously, the preseason games are very close, so we got 10 days until the first preseason game, right? And then 2 weeks of joint practices on the road after that, first in Cleveland, then down in Miami. So you'll start to see a little bit of a rhythm here in terms of how practices are structured, how they're going to take the days off, pair them with the walkthroughs, and obviously travel days mixed in there. So once we get out of these dog days here in the early stages, we'll start to get a little bit into a rhythm, and then before we know it, the regular season will be here. So I would expect that'll start happening right around this time next week.
And Dave, this is when the pressure starts to heat up a little bit for these guys who are vying for a spot on the roster as cuts start to be made as the weeks roll on. Do you expect to see the competition start to heat up too?
I think actually, it becomes a little dog day-ish. I noticed that with the way I'm feeling, the way the players are kind of reacting. They've seen a lot of each other here in the last week and throughout the spring. So from here until training camp, a preseason opener, it gets a little bit monotonous, and just because you've seen the same competition day after day after day. And yeah, with that, and the heat is going to get turned up a little bit this week, you're going to see a little bit more intensity. The pads are on. It will become more physical. Camp goes into a new phase here. Back in the old days, quote unquote, Ella, the coaches would come out and pads would go on, and those first 3 days they would kind of set the tone for training camp. And we're going to be physical and we're going to be nasty. That's not the way it is right now. It is ramping up, and that's where we're in. Today signifies that ramp up period. So yeah, I agree with you. Everybody starts to separate. We all go, oh, it's going to be so hard to make cuts at this position. But what you find generally is that it really does separate. It becomes pretty apparent who's good enough to make this team and who's not quite good enough to make the team. And I think you're going to start seeing that as the pads go on. Starting today, it's a really big practice for the Philadelphia Eagles, moving forward, getting ready for the New York Jets on August 12th.
And then if you look a little bit further down the road, they hit the road for 2 straight weeks. They're in Cleveland and they're in Miami. Fran, how does that sort of prepare them from a competition standpoint? You know, you're taking them away from the NovaCare complex. They're going to take on opponents in Cleveland. Those joint practices are known to be very competitive. Juices are flowing. It's a good thing for these players to get them more game ready, but they're also away from home for an extended period of time before the season starts.
I mean, we could pre-write the quotes right now, right? Because we know what these players are going to be asked. We know how they're going to answer. They're going to say, hey, it's just great to go up against somebody else that's not our teammate. We've been seeing the same guys every day, week after week, over these the start of training camp. So being able to go out in Cleveland, take on the Browns for a couple days, then go out, take on the Dolphins in South Beach for a couple of days. It will be refreshing. It will be intense. It will be very competitive. So a little bit of a change up there on the back end of training camp as they start to make that transition to regular season mode.
All right, well, 10 days until the New York Jets are here at Lincoln Financial Field. Until then, I know both of you will be hard at work on pumping out the content for Eagles fans. So, Dave, what do fans have to look forward to from you?
Well, I want to step back and tell Fran there is not going to be any South Beach practice. Nobody's going to South Beach in Miami. That's for everybody who's having a good time. This is not going to be a good time for the Philadelphia Eagles. No, for me, it's look. I had a great interview. Got to really know AJ Brown yesterday. That Eagles Insider podcast will drop on Thursday. Our Eagles update podcast every day. Please subscribe. It's a 3-4 minute update for you, Eagles fans, to catch up on everything happening here at the NovaCare complex. And of course, we got you covered on the written side on PhiladelphiaEagles.com and our official team app.
All right, and Fran, what do you have for us?
You know, you can check me out every single day at Eagle Eye in the Sky podcast, practice recaps, wherever podcasts can be found.
All right, fellas, thank you so much. That'll do it for us here on Inside Training Camp presented by Independence Blue Cross. We will have you covered next Tuesday, August 9th at 10 a.m. We're going to keep you updated all the time on what's going on here from the NovaCare complex. Well, for myself, Fran Duffy, and Dave Spadaro, go Birds.